Let me tell you a little bit for those of you who are interested and may not know. There's basically 3 approaches to getting the Scripture out to people. 2 of them are translations, and one of them is what we call a paraphrase approach. And let me just give you a real brief rundown. Of the translations, a translation means that the people have gone back to the original languages, the original Hebrew, the original Greek, the original Aramaic. They've gone back to the original manuscripts, as far back as they can get. The original manuscripts are long gone, but the oldest manuscripts. And they have translated from the original language. Now again, what do they translate to? Do they translate to the English of your grandparents, or do they translate to the English of today? It doesn't matter as long as it's still a translation. And in the 2 translations, there's 2 schools of thought. One is called word for word, and the other is called phrase for phrase. And let me just explain to you what this means, because 2 of the most popular translations are on either side of this argument. One is the NAS, which we call a word for word translation. The other is the NIV, which we call a phrase for phrase translation. And here's the difference. It's very simple. If you're translating something word for word, it means you translate every word literally. You still have to make it grammatically work in the new language, or it's not a translation. But you translate every word literally. But when you come to an idiom, what's an idiom? An idiom is like if I say, I was so mad I hit the ceiling. You guys understand I didn't literally hit the ceiling, right? You understand I just mean I was really angry. Okay? I blew my top. That would be another idiom. Okay? In a word-for-word translation, when they run across an idiom, they translate it word for word. So in other words, if someone's translating my sermon, they would translate into another language. The top of his head blew off of his skull. Now the reason that this is good is because when you're translating ancient languages, you don't always know what the idioms are, right? So maybe somebody thinks I said I hit the ceiling, and they think that I'm speaking a colloquialism or an idiom, and so they translate it as, he got really mad, but maybe in fact I actually hit the ceiling. Maybe I literally climbed up on that big ladder they were using to put the screen up, and I hit the ceiling. It would change the meaning if you didn't know that, right? So NAS takes the approach of going word for word, and they decide if the idiom confuses you, that's better than them making an editorial call and maybe getting it wrong. It's an acceptable approach. The NIV is phrase for phrase. That means when they come to something they think is an idiom, they translate it as an idiom. So in other words, they translate the phrase, hit the ceiling, into a phrase that we understand. Got really mad. Blew his top. Both are acceptable, both are respected methods of translation, both have their advantages and disadvantages. Makes the NAS occasionally slightly less readable. And sometimes it confuses you because they're writing something that's an idiom. The NIV, sometimes, undoubtedly, the translators make a mistake. And they translate something as an idiom which is not. And then you don't know what to do. An example would be eye of an eel. It's harder for a camel to go through the eye of an eel than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. There are those who argue that's an idiom. The idea of a camel going through an eye of a needle is an idiom. But nobody knows for sure. So even the NIV translates that as it is. It's hard for a camel to go through an eye of a needle. They just say it the way it is, because nobody knows. But that would be an example where you'd have to guess, if you were going to do that. All right. Third option is what we call a paraphrase. The only thing about a paraphrase, some are good and some are bad, but a paraphrase is not a translation. In a paraphrase, nobody has gone back to the original manuscripts or the earlier languages and taken the Hebrew and the Greek and the Aramaic and translated it. What they've done is they've gone to, for example, an English paraphrase would go to an English Bible and rewrite it in better colloquialism, but they're not translating, they're sort of translating the English into different English, which means that they're only as good as their understanding of what they're reading. And if the original translation was wrong, or if they editorialize even that original translation, they're not translating, they're paraphrasing. That's what paraphrase is. A very popular example of that is The Message. Okay, just so you guys understand that, but here's the thing I want you to know. There's absolutely no reason to tie yourself down to a difficult-to-read translation. None. None. There are very, very good, very, very accurate, very, very readable translations. The NIV Children's Bible is a translation. It's not a paraphrase. But it's just written with a 4th or 5th or 6th grade vocabulary in its translations. But it's a translation, for example. There's all sorts of options: NIV, NAS, NAB, RSV, KJV, NKJV. It sounds like after a while you're reciting intelligence communities, right? CIA, NBC, TV networks, whatever. But there's all sorts out there. Go look around. Look in the front. It'll tell you it's a translation or a paraphrase. Find what works.